Hello everyone, welcome to Nobody's Tribe. It's a pleasure to have you interacting with this video, and I hope that you benefit much from it. I'm just going to talk a little about the story of our lives and the idea of lives falling apart, our life falling apart. As an understanding of mine when I was going through deep suffering, depression, was an understanding that there is a dual nature to our experience. One I call the conceptual life. The conceptual life consists of thoughts and a story, like a constant overlay that we apply to our lives that gives it its solidity and its continuity. And it's ultimately not real. It's ultimately created in your own psyche. It's very fragile. The conceptual life is very fragile. And the only way to interact with this conceptual life is with what I call the conceptual self. The conceptual self is created out of the same raw material as the conceptual life is. And that is concepts, that is structures that only are perceived as a story, and that story has to involve the past and the future, and it has no true permanency, it has no true validity other than the fact that you're telling it to yourself. And that story, that structure gets reawakened every time you interact with a experience that reminds you of that structure. So if you have a structure that is depressed, a structure that feels like a victim, feels unworthy, doesn't feel any validity within itself, anytime you have an experience, that structure will be activated, that storyline will be activated, and that negative perceived experience will be integrated into that structure. And the deeper you go into that, the more intense the reality or the seeming solidity to that story it is, because the story won't seem like a structure, it'll seem like facts. The ultimate delusion of the conceptual life is that it's not in your mind, in the perceiver's mind, it's not conceptual, it is real. It is a fact. Something along the lines of, things will never work out for me. I will never be who I should be. Those are all part of the conceptual life. Some may call it the matrix. Those are thought forms or structures. They're self-created. I guess that the ultimate thing I want to get to is they're self-created. And they are often overlaid on top of an experience that is, possibly feels negative. That is a valid statement. That something may feel negative, but the actual story that is told about it is actually what is keeping it in place. And so to talk along the lines of the topic of this video is, I hope your life falls apart. May sound very strange statement, but I will back that up. Along the lines of growing up as a child, at a young age, life flows very smoothly and everything is very new. There's a lot more groundedness in the outer experience, generally because we're taken care of. We're not carrying this conceptual reality around with us. Of course, we have one at the time, but it's not as overwhelming generally. And some people, their childhoods are the opposite, so I will get into that as well. But for my experience and for many people's experience, there's a flowingness to life at a younger age, where everything is new and life is exciting, and there is no utter destruction of the story. There is no life that falls apart. There is just life is giving you constant sensation and constant gratification. And I'm not saying that you don't have moments of deep sadness and loss, but you immediately can go back to the life giving you what you need, and there's not much reason to go within and to find a non-conceptual self within yourself. And the world is so distracting in a sense. The conceptual reality is so distracting, so exciting and entertaining that there's no need to step out of it. And then as you grow older, and the stresses and the deep questions about who you want to be, where you want to go, and things may collapse and life may fall apart. And that is an opening. It's the best thing that could happen for you, which is why I want your life to fall apart, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. When your life falls apart, there becomes a separation where you see, for once, there's an opening where you see that your life is not a story. It is not something that needs a continuity. That continuity was a fragile framework in which you defined yourself. And when it falls apart, all you're left with is your actual true being, your own non-conceptual isness. And because your isness, your conscious mind, was so focused on the structure, when the structure falls, there is not a lot of active content within in the conscious mind. There's just a space, and that space is the space of consciousness. It is presence. It is, some may say, oneness. It is awareness. It is your attention. It is pure attention, and it does not have a form. It simply is observing. And at first, when one may lose their story and their sense of identity, that consciousness, that state of attention, will seem like an emptiness. It will seem void, and it will be considered a bad thing because life was always filled with the content. The outer experience was all the props with the outer experience. And when the outer experience is gone, all you're left with is that inner emptiness. And many don't realize that emptiness is actually a center point to get the outer experience to be more reflective of who you are, to be more in alignment with who you are. That emptiness isn't something to run from. And when you run from that emptiness, which many do, many very wise, very intelligent people run from that emptiness, seeking out more content, not realizing that harnessing that empty space, it transfers that emptiness into an aliveness, and that aliveness is independent of the conceptual life, the story that you live on the outer level, the outer experience. That emptiness is not contingent on the outer experience. And when you make that emptiness contingent on outer experience, then your inner state is always controlled by life. And when I say life, I don't mean your life essence, I mean content. So it puts you in a very vulnerable state when you make your inner state contingent on outer experience, on the conceptual story of life. So it's not, I guess many have the idea of enlightenment or spiritual attainment, that you get to that place of that awareness, that inner presence, an inner peace. And inner peace is the goal. And then you get there and you just stay there and you meditate, and the whole house burns down, the world burns down, and you're just in the inner state, and that's all gravy. But there's more to that. Consciousness is not here to be stagnant. It's not here to simply harness inner state and let the outer reality collapse. In the past, the energy or vibration of the whole entire world was at such a place where harnessing that state was just an internal feat. It didn't reflect so much externally. It did, but I mean on a general level for most, in order to hold that state, they had to let go of the outer experience because there was such a difference. But now what you can do is you can harness that internal state, the collective energy of our collective, of our world, allows it so that you can harness that inner state first, detach from the outer experience, understand that the emptiness will turn into aliveness as you embody it, and you are no longer forming concepts of your own validity being dependent on whether people give you validity or your experience gives you validity or whatever it may be, that you're just understanding, loving, and accepting of your own presence that is eternally valid. And in doing so, that emptiness, which first seemed negative, becomes the aliveness that sparks the fire for the rest of your whole life. And that inner emptiness, aliveness, will switch back and forth to the feeling of emptiness and aliveness. But the idea is to acknowledge it when it's the emptiness, to still embody it out of pure intention of giving up suffering, I guess you can say, is giving up the conflict of getting your worth from other experiences. And even if your conceptual self, the conceptual reality is telling you you're unworthy or you're not doing enough or whatever it may be, that you can go back to that inner state. From that inner state, you will, I don't want to say in time because it's now, but if you're coming from a very conflicted conceptual self, in time, that emptiness will turn to aliveness, that aliveness will turn to motivation, that motivation will literally change your outer experience. It will flow into your outer experience, and your life will begin to reflect the harness inner state that you hold. Your outer experience is always doing such, and it is looking into the most intense outer experience, and in that, still harnessing that inner state. You may not feel happy about the situation, you may not feel joyful, but you can still harness your inner state. The best vibration you can offer to a very negative situation is one of pure attention, pure awareness, pure perceiving, without the impediments to label or to judge. Even if you are judging naturally, like, I don't like this, that's fine, but you don't want to judge yourself as in saying, I should like this, I should be happy with this. You're allowed to not prefer a situation, but go into your inner state and be pure attention, pure attentiveness, pure aliveness, or if emptiness is what you feel, that's fine as well. As long as you can go to that internal state and acknowledge your internal state and realize when situations come up that are causing a confliction in you, to go back to focus on inner state. And inner state is the key, and that will dissolve negative situations. It will bring towards you positive situations, but it may also bring towards you very uncomfortable situations on purpose because, again, you're practicing harnessing inner state, and the expanded you, the non-conceptual you, wants to bring forth those situations, those tough situations, to really drill in harnessing inner state. I guess I could say the main aspect of my teaching is to harness your consciousness, and your consciousness as a present moment of vibration, a present moment of energy, and allowing when your state of being dips down and you become very frustrated, scared, feeling unworthy, yet you allow those fully, and when you pop out the other side back into feeling good again, you don't judge yourself for it, you thank yourself for it. Okay, that was an experience, that was what it was, and I'm not any less because of it. I am only going to love myself because of it, and love myself more, appreciate myself more as I harness inner state and I internally build my outer experience. For that is the nature of our journey. My unconditional love to all of you, and as always, safe travels in the now.